Hello, good morning, everyone. This is Dr. Sean Carey from the Evolving Practice Podcast, and I'm with,
Dr. Bill Moss.
and we're super excited because we're here with our very good friend, Dr. Tim Murzycki, who's been a
Very,
long
very
time.
good friend. Very
Yes,
good.
very, lots of varies. Uh, we've gone back for I don't know, 12 years or something like that. We both got started in practice roughly the same time, and we've been fast friends. We've had very similar journeys as far as chiropractic and then energy healing. So we're excited to talk about this and kind of share how our our thoughts, our views, our healing experiences have changed over the years,
Mhm.
and what we've learned, maybe the mistakes that we've made, what we think about differently. So welcome, Dr. Tim.
Hey guys, I am like super grateful to be here. I was nervous as I was getting ready this morning. I was sweating. Like this is a big deal. It's Dr. Sean, Dr. Bill. I gotta be my best for these guys.
Well, we were both nervous when we first met you too.
Yeah,
That's fair. I have that effect on a lot of people. Yes. Yes.
and we are doing a very early morning interview today. Maybe not very early, but this is 8 a.m. So we're all still kind of waking up a little bit.
Oh, well, time to wake up, gentlemen. The day's already begun. We're halfway through.
Let's do it.
Did you have an espresso with your new espresso machine, Tim?
I actually, yes, I am sipping on my iced latte as we speak. It's
Nice.
quite delicious. I also have my water as well. But
Excellent.
yeah, it's become a nice routine for me, a nice ritual.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever partaken in an espresso machine before at home?
I bought, is it an espresso or a Nespresso machine?
Yes, no end. But I've heard good things
Oh.
about Nespresso too.
Yeah. So one time I was teaching in Buenos Aires. Do you guys know David Serio? Are
Yeah.
you familiar? So
Yeah.
I went down there to teach, and the first time I ever met that guy, he's a wild man. And he drinks a lot of espresso. And I was
Oh,
teaching all weekend. So I think we had like 60 espressos like the entire weekend. As soon as I came home, I brought myself an espresso machine and I was like just like hooked. It was really not good for a caffeine addiction.
no, I'd imagine you probably had to go through a detox or
Yeah.
something, right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Bill, that's awesome. Your career with traveling around and teaching, it still impresses me. I feel like there's so much more I have to do when I hear that from
Well,
you.
I don't feel like I have to do it anymore. When I tell people about it, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, it was
Yeah.
a lot." So I think I'd rather be a homebody like we are now. But it's funny because I know so much about you, but I don't really know your start into chiropractic that much. I know where
Yeah.
you went to school or like
Okay.
what was your draw to like the healing work or
Yeah. So like I knew nothing about chiropractic when I was younger. And I can tell you that I remember when I was in high school, there were like two things I knew had to happen in my life. Number
Hmm,
one is I wanted to get married and be a dad. Number two, I wanted to be some kind of a doctor and
hmm,
help
Mm.
people. And the only way I knew how to do that at the time was like, okay, well, it must be med school.
hmm,
So as I pursued that, and I did like, I did when I was like in high school over the summer, I did like some med school camp at like a college and things like that. I loved the anatomy and physiology. I loved the science. I loved the structure, and yet it wasn't resonating for me. And I don't know, like if that was ever something that you had ever pursued along your path or sought out along
Mm.
your path of
hmm.
what it means to be a healer for you. But I saw it. I'm just like, yeah. I was even shadowing other medical doctors. I'm like,
Interesting.
Yeah.
this stuff. Obviously, there's times where it's important, but it's just super. It's not resonating with me. There's just a disconnect somewhere.
Yeah.
I didn't know what else I wanted to do. I continued with like anatomy and physiology. My undergrad's actually in laboratory sciences, so I worked in a lab before going
Mhm.
to chiropractic school.
Wow.
And then my mom started seeing a chiropractor, and she's like, you should really go talk to this guy. I think there's things because my mom and I, when she was alive, the connection she and I had was like we were both really spiritual. We had lots of
Yeah.
spiritual talk. She was amazing for that.
Hmm.
And so she's like, look, this guy has a lot of interesting things to say about like nervous system and stuff. I think you should go talk with him. And you guys might laugh at this, but I'm like, Mom, like I'm sure chiropractic's great for neck pain and low back pain, but I want to do something more than that. She's like,
You
oh my
said that.
gosh.
You said that. That's
I
awesome.
totally said that. I totally said that. What did I know? I'm like the average. I get it when somebody comes into our chiropractic offices
Yeah.
and they're like, hey, it hurts here. Can you crack me here? And that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can appreciate that. You don't know what you don't know, right? And that's always that's like with anything in life. So yeah, so I sat down and I talked with this guy, and he told me all about chiropractic, and he talked about the nervous system. He actually blocked out a new patient appointment in his schedule just so I could come in and talk with him.
That's cool.
And I am forever grateful to him for this. And yeah, so it was one of those moments where my clairsentience super kicked in, and as soon as he started talking about the spine and the nervous system, it just connected to everything. My super goosebumps, super goosebumps, like the hair stood up on the back of my neck. I'm like, I don't know what this stuff is, but there's something here, and I need to dive deeper into it. So
cool.
as far as like before me going into chiropractic school, that's pretty much what happened. And then I married my high school sweetheart, and she became pregnant, and we had a baby. And they're like, all right, well, let's go to the middle of America where they have super tropical winters, and let's go to chiropractic school. Yeah, that's what we did. And about that, and if my wife were here right now, she might give me a nice little smack on the cheek. But so I went to Palmer, and you guys know that at the time Palmer had 2 other schools. They still have one of them, but they had one in California. They had one in Florida.
Florida. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, but I went to Davenport, Iowa, because it's the fountainhead. It's where, in terms of Palmer, it was the fountainhead, and it had the most resources.
Yeah.
And at first she's like, man, we're gonna go to Iowa, really? And I'm like, yeah. And I didn't necessarily share with her the other locations because I didn't think it was pertinent. I'm not going for a vacation. I'm going to like, oh my gosh, the
This
day
is
we
it.
went
It's the only one, honey. It's the only one.
well, I didn't necessarily say that, but I wasn't hiding anything. I'm like, no, like this is the school. This is the one I need to go to. So we went. We had a tour of the school. It was one part of the tour. They had pictures of all 3 campuses, and they said, so as you know, we have our Davenport campus, but then we also have our sister campuses in Florida and California.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, if our wives could shoot lasers from their eyes, I think mine might have done that at that point.
I don't know. Have you ever been to Palmer, Florida?
You know what? I actually haven't. Have you? Any of you guys?
Yeah.
No.
I taught there. It's a little Florida man, if you know what I mean. Like it's what beach is that? It's like Daytona Beach, kind of.
Yeah, I know it's in Port Orange. I don't know what beach it is though.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. I'm not a big Florida person, but I can see the allure. I mean, I went there in the winter one time, and it was like a great reprieve. But yeah, I've also been to Davenport too in the winter. In January, and it's something else.
Yeah, it's not great at all, right? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's kind of my story of getting into chiropractic school, and I thought I knew nothing about it, and then that's where it was in chiropractic school. For all of us here, it's like that's where you start getting dipped into. There's a lot more to healing than something from the outside. Here's a pill.
Yeah.
Here's a drug, here's a whatever. Yeah.
Now, before you went, did you kind of have that? Were you like primed to that philosophy of chiropractic?
Yeah, without really. Yes. To answer, short answer, yes. So like, but even before I started receiving chiropractic as a patient, there was a time where all of a sudden I started getting migraines, right? And they were really intense, and because I worked in a lab, I had access to certain medical doctors I just happened to become close with. And I'm like, what is going on? Like these migraines were intense, and I would have to or sharp pain headaches, and I have to stop whatever I was doing. Just like almost like crouch into a ball and just hold my head. It was that bad. So I went to a neurologist, and he took a brain scan to make sure there was no internal bleeding. And his only answer after everything was all said and done was, well, you're 21 years old. We're going to put you on a pill for the rest of your life.
Jeez.
And I said that, and I was 21 and I knew nothing about anything else. I just, that just I told the neurologist, I said, with all due respect, that doesn't seem right. I said, that what is the pill doing? Why? I said, I'm 21. There has to be another explanation for this. So I never did it, and I didn't really think anything about it. And then when I started receiving chiropractic care, it came out about previous traumas affecting our spines. And yeah, like I got hit in the head and concussions when I was younger. And
Yeah.
as soon as I was adjusted, all that stopped. All that stopped, and there was no pills needed. And again, not even fully understanding at that point as a person receiving chiropractic care, but there were some major changes going on within my body physically. So yeah, so Bill, I think there was something always kind of tuned in to that, and that's been a journey even as a practitioner, as far as what does that mean? There's then all of a sudden I'm like, oh well, this is it. This is the one way and the only way. And then there were some lessons I had to have with that as well. So yeah, it's kind of like a figuring out what's going to be best in the situation.
And Tim, you've been in practice, what, like 12 years now or so? I think it's 12 for me. I think
I've had my private office. Wait, we're going to 2024. So it's actually been 10 years I've had my office, but I've been practicing about a year, 2 years before that. So about 12 years in practice, but 10 years in my office. Yeah.
We're like all the same exact.
Guys, it's really crazy. Yeah, there's a strong parallel with our tracks, right?
Well, even when you're talking, like my mom was a big influence on me. Kind of stepping into chiropractic too. She took me for the first time, and my mom has one of the most significant scoliosis that I've ever seen. And she was always fascinated by the spine from that point, and she had never been, and she was the first one to talk to me. So kind of similarly to you, when I was starting to experience good results, and then I went to college and I was under care while I was running, we had access to a chiropractor. We would always talk about like the fascinating aspects of it. So it's interesting to hear that story, how that kind of cultivated your relationship. And I also, right around 21, had all these medical testing done because I had I had debilitating anxiety that had like dizziness and stuff. So it's like, and I was at the neurologist, and they're like, giving me, I ended up on anxiety meds, but it was still kind of the same thing. Like, you're going to be on this indefinitely until something changes somewhere. It's kind of like when's the end game? And it's like, well, we don't really know.
I feel like I'm talking to a twin right now, Bill. That's
right.
crazy.
I know this is kind of fun to get to, like, even we've known each other for all of us for years, and it's like, still we're doing this formal interview, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's more to Tim.
Yeah.
So
there's so much more to Tim, guys.
I know.
And guys, stick with me. I'm going to help make your taste in music that much better too.
Okay. Tim loves heavy metal music, so
yeah, I do, and classical, yeah. Bach, Vivaldi, great stuff. Scarlatti,
a range of everything.
Yeah. So one of the things that's interesting too is that we both we all share this commonality as far as how I met you both is through these different chiropractic conferences or chiropractic groups. But they shared this similarity in that chiropractic was always about something more to us. Like I know we all really love the physical healing benefits of chiropractic, but there's also the spiritual piece that I think we were all looking for. And one of the things that chiropractic talks about in its philosophy and its science of healing is it's really about a reconnection of the spirit, the nervous system within the human body. Because originally when chiropractic was founded, the founder of chiropractic didn't really understand what was happening. It was a deaf person got their hearing back after an adjustment. And they had to really discover, okay, like, how did this actually happen? How does it happen as if you adjust something in the spine that all these different things shift within the body? So one of the things I loved as I started researching the philosophy was that there's this spiritual connection within the physical. And by adjusting the spine, we actually open up these different energy channels or physical channels for the nervous system. And Tim, I remember very like profoundly, you and I had this conversation one day where we were like, I remember where I was.
Still remember it.
Yeah.
Dude, it was 2013. I still remember it.
I was actually at the restaurant yesterday. I was in a restaurant parking lot, and we were having a conversation about, like, we love chiropractic. We all deeply share this love for chiropractic, and we're like, but there just has to be something more to this piece about reconnecting chiropractic, like reconnecting the physical with the spiritual. Like we didn't think we knew chiropractic could play a role in that, but there was something more. And we were just like talking it out, Tim and I. It's like, I wonder, like, there has to be more to this. And I wonder what that is. And it like that would be so cool if we could learn more about that piece. And we were trying to find it at these different conferences, and we all were at that same time, I think.
Yeah.
And we just like that piece. There wasn't really a lot shared.
Sean, can I stop you right there for a second? Because we're talking about the same conversation from like 2013, right?
Yeah.
I still remember that conversation because I remember. So at that point, I was getting ready to launch this office, my private office, my chiropractic office, and I just remember coming to a point where it's like, all right, yes, there's still deeper ways we can make ourselves better as chiropractic practitioners and technique and the art. Absolutely. And that's a quest we're always facing.
Yeah.
But what about that other spiritual piece? Because you're referring to D.D. Palmer, and you're referring, I even have one of his quotes out in my office where chiropractic is about uniting man the physical with man the spiritual, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's cool and I love it, but like, yeah, what does that mean? Even that, like, what does that mean? And how can we tap into that more? And you and I, so Sean, I actually met you first before I met Dr. Bill. And when I met you was at, with the MACP group. And as I got to like connect with you, I automatically sensed, and I hope it's okay. I'm going to like just blow you up a little bit here. Like, dude, you spoke with such wisdom when we were talking about chiropractic. And I'm like, all right, this is the guy I need to connect with more. And I get to know him more because there's something about it I just really resonate. And we would talk more. And there was that conversation in 2013. I just remember, oh my gosh, like it was such an awesome conversation. And I'm just like, where is this missing piece? How do we attain this? Like, where can we go to learn how to bring more of that spiritual piece into the chiropractic? Not to make it a religion, nothing like that, but to give it that extra zest, that extra vitality, that extra magic behind what we're doing, whether our patients fully understand it or not. But how do we maximize this for them, for their healing, their well-being, their growth? And oh my gosh, I mean, Sean, hasn't that opened up like so much more, right?
Yeah, I feel like that conversation was actually a big shift in
that was pivotal.
Anyway. Yeah,
that was pivotal.
It was like opening the door to something, really like us requesting to the universe of, to be shown something. And
go ahead, Sean.
Well, I think one of the things that's important for people to understand with chiropractic, to take a step back, is that this is something that it's almost like a martial art, and that there's this like infinite journey to mastery that never really stops. Like it's not like you go to a practitioner and you get the same thing via any practitioner. There's a deep art to it, like martial arts, and it's something that to the best chiropractors in history, like the amount of change and impact that they've had we're talking about on the most severe cases has been like world changing as far as what they've been able to do to help people. So the three of us have been on this quest to really reach our highest level of potential with the art. In order to do that, there's a spiritual component that had to be brought in. And that spiritual component, part of it is, like harnessing the mind to a point of like single focus. Part of it is being fully in the present. But then there are so many other pieces too, like the understanding of the anatomy and the technique. And so we realized that we had been working on the technique and these other pieces, but there's a spiritual component that we needed. And that was one of the things that through a roundabout way for me, it was a Kundalini awakening, but it was like I ended up finding the Modern Mystery School through our other friend, Dr. Nick Panzarella. He introduced it to me. I also saw him at this group, MACP, and he was
I know, I feel like he's missing from this conversation right
now. We're going to have him on. Like,
I met Tim at the MAC. What's the acronym? MACP?
MACP, yeah.
Yeah, that's where I met Tim at Peter's house too. So it's funny how that philosophical group actually kind of connected us first, initially.
I think it's the longest running chiropractic philosophy group in like probably in the world, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah. But it was, I saw Dr. Nick. He was glowing. I was like, I want to glow too. That was my like, what'd you do? He's like, I went and saw this guy and I did this thing called a life activation. And I was like, okay, can you give me his number? Because he was literally glowing. And then I texted Jordan and I was like, hey, I was referred by Dr. Nick. Can I come in and do a life activation session? And it was like the next day I went in.
So I remember that too, right? So here's the funny thing, and for anybody who's listening, and maybe for those who are listening, and maybe they haven't necessarily pursued some kind of like a spiritual path for growth, and it's interesting how it can affect you. So Sean, you just said you met Dr. Nick, and you're like, oh my gosh, you just like jumped right in, and you're like, I want this thing, like I need to have this thing, and then when Dr. Nick had shared it with me, it was like, it was almost like the complete opposite. Because at first, I have the tattoos on my arms for like archangels and stuff, right?
Yeah.
He's like, whoa. He's like, what are those tattoos? He's like, dude, you got to go do this thing. And I remember like, that sounds cool, but no. And it was I don't know why it was the resistance was there.
Yeah.
But then I took long story short, I eventually did connect with Jordan, and then everything like super changed from there, which is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. It's just funny how that happens.
My first time meeting Nick, I was like, what's wrong with this guy?
So here's a spectrum.
Why does he not like me? And now it's so funny. I tell him all the half the time the people I'm like, oh, I don't know if I like this person, end up being like my best friends. Because I remember meeting him at the Berkshires, and I was like, oh, he's kind of gruff and kind of comes, and he'll even joke like that's how he almost comes across initially. I'm like, now I just like love Nick so much because he's so like stable and grounded and like.
And he's such a teddy bear on the inside. I hope he's okay with me saying that. He comes off gruff, but he's a teddy bear.
Well, he said it to me, and he understands it, and he's improved it like much, over the years, so much.
I had resistance initially too with it because he had told me multiple times about Jordan, but then like, and because I had known Nick before seeing him with this one specific instance, but I saw him and it was like I hadn't seen him in a couple months, and I was like, what changed? You're glowing. And he's like, I did this session, like I've been telling you to go do. And I was like, okay, like now I'm gonna do it. But I had to see him I had to see him glowing because I had seen him before and didn't see the glow, and then there was a glow.
Yeah, that makes total sense for sure.
Yeah. And then that was something that was like once we started doing that, like I remember like you guys were some of the first people I told about my experience with it too, because it was like this experience I had with it was like I don't know what exactly is happening to me, but it's something good. And my senses were opening up and my spiritual like connection was opening up, and like something good was happening within me. And it certainly translated into chiropractic because like so much of what we do does have to deal with energy. Like we're in people's personal spaces very much. You're very close to them. Oftentimes it's places where they're holding a lot of pain or trauma. So energy ends up being a big deal.
And as a practitioner of really any kind. I mean, I know we're here talking about chiropractic, but this can also refer to anyone else. But we talk about in the beginning of this healing. It's like it is multidimensional, and there's so many flows back and forth that happen, not just with one person, but especially if one person is standing in the presence of another person. So there we are. For instance, we are chiropractors. We are right next to people. We got our hands on people. And so there's like so many different ways to look at this where there's an exchange of energy that's happening. There's a facilitation of energy that's happening, whether the chiropractor is intending to do this or not, but you're just standing in their field. So whatever pains they're coming in with, I mean, guys, I know I'm not the only one. I know you can attest to this. If it's a physical pain, if it's a mental, emotional pain, an energetic spiritual pain, like when you're in the presence of that person, I mean, how many times have you just kind of you sense something, whether it's intuitive, whether it's conscious or subconscious, and then you bring it up to them and they're like, oh my gosh, like it's almost like you hit the nail on the head. So there's, if you will, I know that's not a chiropractic adjustment, but there's almost like an adjustment happening there just by addressing that energy.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then that means different things from there. I know, Bill, I just cut you off, but I know that like that means different things from there because now you're taking on their stuff and you have to kind of like, make sure your energy is strong, clean, pure. So that's number one.
Mhm.
And then number two, for us as practitioners, my gosh, like the responsibility we hold
Yeah.
for ourselves, for our own lifestyles, to make sure that we are a certain way when we
Yeah.
step into their energy fields, right? It's
Yeah.
not just, hey, are we getting enough sleep? Hey, are we abusing alcohol? Hey,
Yeah,
what's our
right.
nutrition like? It's also like, okay, how are we taking care of ourselves spiritually, energetically as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that, because I feel like year after year, this concept happens more times where somebody comes in for a first day and you sit down and basically you're just having a conversation, and then we do an assessment. And the second day they come back and they like already are experiencing like progress.
A
Yeah.
shift.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like they're
Yeah.
like, you know what? I'm already starting to see this and feel this, and I'm more hopeful. Or they'll have greater
That right
awareness.
there, Bill, that right there is
Yeah.
my favorite, is when
Yeah.
when they're more hopeful. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
it's like you broke through a shell of some kind, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the start, and that's why I love it. It's like, and I've seen that over the years with the spiritual work that we've done. The process starts when they show up. It's
Yeah.
it's beyond just like the adjustment. And we were talking about this a little bit earlier, and you can comment on it, but it's like chiropractors in its philosophy are like searching for that how to make chiropractic greater, which part of that is how do you make the technique or the approach, the technical aspect greater, but then how do you make yourself greater? And
Yeah.
the masters knew that, right? And we still give them credit for, like Sean said, working with like these crazy cases and getting wild results. And it's like the technology, the knowledge, the information have all evolved, but in sense, we as practitioners, to some degree, I don't want to say de-evolved, but haven't continued that progression
Mhm.
that many of them were searching for. And I think that search is what kept them to a higher degree of themselves. And I think you're kind of tapping into that with what you're discussing there.
Agree. We hear some of the great names of our chiropractic forefathers and foremothers, if you will, the
Yeah.
ones
Yeah.
before us. And yeah, like the quests they went through themselves
Mhm.
to create big things in chiropractic so that they could serve people on a bigger level. Huge quests. And I think that there's a piece of that where that's been lost, I think.
Mhm.
uh yeah, we're always looking to what am I trying to say here?
Like
The big quest was that.
like rekindle it, or
Yeah, just rekindle it. But it's always going to start with, like, I mean, guys, I know you know this. So I'm preaching to my brothers here, but like it always starts within, right? Like,
Yeah.
no matter what big effect you want to have on the outside, it always starts on the inside first.
Mhm.
Yeah.
As within, so without. And
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I do recognize and see that a piece of that, not just in our chiropractic profession with its
Yeah.
greatness, but in other ways, there's a level of mediocrity that's been allowed to persist.
Yeah, there's this mediocrity and also this like overly mechanistic type way where I think it wasn't
Mechanistic.
that way at the very
Yeah.
beginning.
Mhm.
And, like, I think about Dr. Clarence Gonstead as we're having this conversation, who was this chiropractor who had like severe, I believe it was rheumatoid arthritis. And he was so sick, he was so successful with his adjustments at getting sick people well that they end up I forget where he was. Where was it? It wasn't Wisconsin. It was like
It was Wisconsin.
was
Yeah.
it?
It was Mount
Mount Horeb.
Horeb, I think, right?
Mount
Yeah.
Horeb. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so he's just like way off the beaten path, and he was getting such amazing results with patients
He
that
had
they
a
had to
run.
build a hotel next to his clinic, and they end up having to build an airport next to the hotel because people would fly in to see him from
Crazy.
all over in Mount Horeb, Wisconsin. And one of the things he talked about was like becoming one with the bone, and it
Yeah.
was so there's this principle of oneness, and that he was tapping into. And like I think now with chiropractic school, it's become so medicalized,
Mm.
and it's
Yeah.
become such a focus on the different disease processes, and such a shift in understanding away from the one anything spiritual is just wiped away as pseudoscience.
Mhm.
Like that was the first thing to go. And I think
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go for it, Sean.
like the same thing happened in medicine. There was in medicine, the spirituality was a component as well. But that also got stripped away. So we're looking at something that's just any sense of spirituality or anything that doesn't fit into that mold is pulled out. And then you talk about it from a purely mechanistic perspective, but the system doesn't work that way. Like it's an illusion that the physical body functions independently of everything else, independently of the soul and spirit.
Great. Yeah.
Like the nervous system is absolutely affected by what's going on with you, emotionally and mentally, and what you're carrying in your energy field. 100%. We see that all day in terms of people, like what they're struggling with. And I can't tell you how many different times people have come in for energy sessions, and before we get started, maybe they're in a lot of physical pain, and then we do an energy session and they don't have physical pain anymore. Like there's such a direct link that we get to see. But in terms of healthcare, in terms of having a license and all those things, it's like that's not something that you really get to talk about. And it's something that's been completely stripped away from schooling due to credentialing and licensing.
Yeah, and it's something that I'm actually very grateful for in our profession. We are able to acclimate, use as much as we do, because I mean, I have, for instance, there's a nearby medical doctor and two doctors I've spoken to, and not so much that they've looked into wanting to bring in as much of a spiritual aspect, as much as they wanted to bring in more of a, not so much a pathology aspect, but more of a healing, self-healing aspect.
Yeah.
And they said, but we just can't, because both of them have given me the same story. They said there's such a standard of care for us to uphold our license. Should we start doing different things, now our license is in question, we can't even work with anybody, and then they also have families to feed. So it's interesting. But as far, what I love about with us is that we are no coincidence that we all went in, the three of us went into doing what it is that we're doing professionally as chiropractors. And we have, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but for those who don't know, like, we talk about healing, there's a focus over here called pathogenesis. There's a focus over here called salutogenesis. You have pathogenesis, which is talking about the creation of disease and how to minimize it, how to bring it down, which is something that our current sick care is quite adept in. They're quite amazing with. But that's only one piece of the puzzle. It's an imbalance. If you have this middle pillar in the middle, you got pathophysiology over here. There's also salutogenesis, which is creation of health, right? And this isn't just a chiropractic paradigm. This was brought about before with somebody else, but it's both of those need to be recognized. And there's not enough of salutogenesis. And the way I look at it, it's like, if we have to be balanced in the middle, you can't, just like anything in life, you can't just fight the negative, fight the negative, fight the negative. You have to increase, you have to figure out what are those healing factors. You need to increase it. So that's where our piece, Sean, I think that's where, not from a chiropractic perspective, absolutely, but then also from our conversation in 2013, it's like, all right, well, what's the spiritual piece, that vitalistic piece that we can tap into for ourselves? And that's where, once I started like discovering the mystery school, and I said, okay, wait a minute, there's this initiation piece. And I remember hearing about sacred geometry and some of these other pieces, that I said, okay, look, I want to learn these things. I don't want to do the other stuff, but I want to learn these things because I want to learn these things for myself and my family, number one. And then number two, I want to bring it into my office, and I want to allow it to be an awesome supportive healing network for those coming in for chiropractic care. It's my duty as a practitioner to be the absolute best that I can be for these people coming in. And so that's really how, it started fulfilling that desire that you and I had about how do we tap into this more to become even more powerful practitioners. And it's, and little did I realize, well, it's not just about learning a technique or a tool as a practitioner. It's also about self-healing as a practitioner and growth, so that you bring that, you share that with the rest of your people, right?
It's awesome. Well, I mean, how has that, obviously this podcast is called the Evolving Practice Podcast. And you started with this chiropractic model, and over time you fought doing the healing work at first. It sounds, like even receiving the life activation, the resistance, and now your practice has evolved where like that is a big part of it as well. Yeah. Can you touch on like how that journey was for you?
Yep, how my journey. Well, yeah, totally. To be totally frank, I was like super in the closet when I was learning this stuff. I really was like, I wanted to learn it, but I was afraid to have other people witness the things that I was doing for fear of being scolded for being a freak or what's the word I'm looking for? Like, oh man, look at this voodoo guy. He's a fraud. He's not whatever. But here's what I found, and this is what was really cool. There was still, as I went through and I would embark on this path and work with the prayers, the tools, the rituals, purely for myself, I felt this incredible internal desire to connect more with them. And the more I did, the more I started noticing outside of me things changing. And so when I was doing, for instance, I learned how to work with sacred geometry and set a sacred space. When I brought that into my office, again, I was super shy about it. And so I would do it when nobody else is in the office, my staff, nothing. And I would do these prayers. And then I would find that, like, my staff, yes, but even more surprisingly, I would have patients come in who never told me they could sense energy in certain ways. But I remember one patient coming in, she was saying, "All right, Dr. Tim, what's different in here?" And I'm like, "I don't, what are you talking about?" And I'm still not even placing the fact that, I just worked with some sacred geometry. And she's just like, "Look, I never told this to you before, but ever since I was born, I could always just see energy. And last week I was here and I'm here now. And right now it's totally different." And she was explaining what she was seeing, just beautiful, like white, sparkly energy. She goes, "And it feels different. It feels, what did you do?" I'm like, "Get out of town." And I started having more and more people actually coming and saying that. So you started seeing the fruits. You started seeing people change when they were coming in. The things they were seeking or talking about, or deeper connections were starting to, these things were happening, they were changing. And I said, I would see it within the people I take care of. I would see it within the people that work, that are on the team with me in my office, my staff, my assistants and everything. And I would see it in my family. I'm like, okay, there's clearly something more to all of this stuff that we're learning. So then I would feel the need to take the next step, because I'm like, if what I just did here is having this positive effect on not just me, but on other people. All right, what more is available? So I would take another step, and I would maybe receive another initiation, or I would undergo Kabbalah. And of course, like, just like I said before with me, my resistance would kick in again, but then I would complete these things and I'm like, my gosh, hot dang, like, look at the changes that's happening all around. And sometimes at first the changes, I mean, you guys can attest to this, changes at first can sometimes feel like a sacrifice. It can feel uncomfortable in some way, but then you get through it. And on the other side, it was like way better than you ever could have imagined. You're like, why did I take so long to why did I stall and not just get right to this point? But so what I find now in, our growth is never ending. It's as far as we want to take it. But even still, like, we're all doing different things to just continue to grow, discover ourselves spiritually, what that means physically. And as I continue along the path, you have people coming in and just like, they're seeking things that all of a sudden you're diving into, and you didn't, you know what I mean? There's a synchronicity there. I know you guys have experienced this yourself in your offices.
Yeah.
100%.
Well, I think you kind of nailed an aspect that we never talked about before, but this is probably what made a lot of the spiritual work so real for me, is the fact that, like, because we see so many people on a regular basis.
Which is a beautiful thing.
You get an instant, it's like instant mirror and feedback of like what's changing in your life, right? And I know right from the start, when I did Empower Thyself and received initiation and I came back and started practicing and implementing the rituals, like immediately people were responding to me completely differently. Like one day they're not, the next day, like everything that's showing up and I'm experiencing with them was so different. And I have always, I think that's a justification. If somebody is a practitioner, by having some of these tools in this work, internal work, it's unbelievable how quickly things come back and show up in this different way. Every step of the way, I've always been like, I wonder what it's going to look like in my practice, because it's such a strong mirror and an interaction between others' energies, like you touched on earlier.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. It goes even before. Do you guys ever read the E-Myth book? Especially there's the E-Myth for chiropractors, right?
Yeah.
And one of the coolest things, what I love about even just like, I think it was the introduction of the book. I have it over there. I should probably look at it. But he talked about, even there, he was almost speaking hermetically, where he was saying that, your practice as a clinical practice, as a business, it is a reflection of you on the inside. It is a projection of you on the inside. And if you are looking to if you're experiencing some challenges in certain ways, it's because there's first something within you that is experiencing that challenge, and it's your projection out there. And isn't that the truth? What we've learned with, as we study Hermetics, as we study Kabbalah. And so that's really, there's something else that's backing up exactly what we're saying. And every time we take a step, we shed a layer of what we thought was us. We uncover a new piece of us that was maybe lying dormant, and we didn't even know it was there. And then you got this new version of you, Bill 4.0, 5.0, 6.0. And then every time you step into the office, you're updated. You notice changes happening within the office. And it could be with your staff, your patients. It could even just be people on the outside. Guys, how many times have you been told by, I don't know, maybe you're in a grocery store? I get yelled at all the time by my wife and my kids. I talk too much to people when I go grocery shopping.
That's why we had you on here, though, because you talk a lot. That's good.
Well, and honestly, it's funny coming into this. I'm like, what am I even going to talk about? I don't even know. But here we are.
Yeah.
But even just when you're talking to somebody else, haven't you guys ever been told, like, wow, it's just different being in your energy? Like there's something, it feels different being around you. I like being around you, or whatever it is. It's this things start shifting, and some of the stuff we start to consciously understand, but there's a lot more we don't, right?
Without a doubt.
I think one of the areas people get stuck sometimes is, I'm just imagining like talking with patients. Like I have different patients sometimes who it's like, oh, this person would really benefit from energy work.
Yeah.
But they don't always, maybe there's some resistance to like, I'll suggest it, but they don't kind of want to listen. Which happens, right? But
I don't know what that's like. I've never done that to somebody else, right?
Like sometimes we'll see our patients, right? And it's like, okay, they're struggling with something. Maybe the person's like 60 pounds overweight and sedentary. There's usually like, it's rarely that the person is coming in where they're having an acute pain from like they got in a car accident yesterday, or they got a sports injury yesterday. The vast majority of pain issues is stuff that's built up over time. So usually there's some lifestyle pieces that are involved. The person's not exercising enough. They're too stressed. Their diet is really poor. They're drinking too much alcohol, things like that. So sometimes it's like you have for somebody to make a shift in those things that's actually causing the pain. They probably need to make a shift emotionally or spiritually in some way too, because there's something that's they're holding on to, right? Like if the person's drinking too much alcohol and that's really affecting them physically, like that alcohol is filling a void for something. And so sometimes people will, I think, like block themselves off from something that could really, really help them, because they're just not, they're not wanting to give up that crutch or that piece of control or whatever it is. But I see that as one of the things that gets people stuck the most. And like one of the things is when we do the spiritual energy work is we're all trained as spiritual guides, and it's never our job to make somebody's choice for them. We simply like kind of give a nudge. It's like, hey, here's something that you might consider trying. And but sometimes it's like people are afraid to take that step, and in that process you just see them kind of get stuck in at a certain energy, a certain pattern, and it's ultimately their choice. But I was just wondering how you guys kind of help people through that piece.
Bill, do you want to say something? Or you want me to go?
Well, it's funny because I'm teaching a class this weekend, and I actually have 3 dates planned out for my classes, which I don't usually have this, but I have a December date and a February date, and I have people in all of those classes. And part of it's a result of what kind of Sean's describing is like, one of the things that makes spiritual development so real for me is the wild resistance that people experience that's very real. It's very real to them in the sense that like it comes to the surface and it's obvious. Well, I don't know how to say this. It comes to the surface and it's like tangible for them, but it's not the real answer. And like as we work with people through that resistance to like help them progress and move past their stuff, there is that like holding back that Sean's talking about, like this anchor that's like, well, if I let go of this, what would that mean for me? And there's an unknown in that. So that's really quite difficult. And it's interesting how when we start to present this work more and more, I almost sit back. I think I took offense to that at first, right? As like, oh, they're rejecting what I have to offer. And now I'm like, this is important to that person. I'm excited to see them get through whatever that part is to move forward. And it's just been very readily obvious in my practice recently. I've had some chiropractic clients who were like really ready to move forward in other ways, but then they stop showing up too chiropractically because it's like when we hold a light up to show them, it's like, I don't really want to, maybe I don't want to move forward. I got a little taste and I want to, but maybe I don't, because what would that mean? So what Sean's describing, I've like been experiencing it a lot the last 2 weeks. And that's what's also made this spiritual work very real for me, because I've never seen anything create this internal like resistance, and not in a way that's like rejecting, in a way that like there's something there, right? To grow. There's a piece, a deep piece to grow. So
if I may add to that, I think what is an important dynamic to keep, for all of us, not just here, but listeners as well, to remember is that the natural way of the planet. I mean, even if you just talk in terms of physics, right? It's if you ignore something, it atrophies, right? There's entropy, right? So you ignore a garden. Okay, well, weeds are going to grow. You ignore your teeth. Okay, stuff's going to build up and break down. You ignore your body. It's going to weaken. You ignore your spine. Okay, there's going to be subluxations and things that build up over time just because you're living your life. So I think what was a hard, with that in mind, what was a hard concept for me to accept is that the natural way of life to do the things that are right for us, good for us, they're not easy. They actually, anything, whether it's relationships, it's nutrition, it's working out, it's a spiritual practice. The things that are good for us are usually the things that are hard. They require time, they require energy, sacrifice, money, whatever. And but you need to do those things. You need to constantly put your wood in that fire to keep that fire going and keep that glow going. Because if you don't, that fire dampens, and then the darkness without the light will be there. It'll predominate, right? Just like all those examples we were saying. And so when we don't ever just stay the same, and I know the three of us know this, we talk about this in chiropractic even, but we're never just staying the same. Some people, how many times when we work with people, they're like, well, if I do nothing about it, it's probably just going to stay at X. But again, talk about the garden, your teeth, a relationship, a skill at anything, could be a sport or a musician. Like, no, if you ignore that thing and you ignore it for 2, 3, 4 years and you go back to it, it is not going to be the same, will it? It's either going to get better or it's going to get worse based on the influence you chose to feed into it. And I think what's important for us to remember is that as we are, if it's a spiritual practice, if it's something that's good for us, if we say no to doing that thing, it's not like it just stays like that. It creates a gap, and that gap is going to be filled with what we already have seen from the physics of the world, the entropy and everything else, right? So it creates a gap. It takes active energy to keep filling that and growing it. Love love is a verb, right? Love is not a noun; it's a verb.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
That's such a great thing. And I just want to do a time check because I know we promised you, Dr. Tim, that we'd have a hard stop at.
Oh yeah, I got just a few minutes left, guys. This is
Yeah.
these last few minutes are gonna be the best few minutes of your life. So how do you want to spend it?
How do you want to spend it? Just, yeah.
Yeah. Do you guys have any final thoughts that you want to share?
I think I just kind of I think what I said was actually my final thought. I
agree with you.
I don't think there's anything else I can add to that.
No, that's probably one of the best, like, really like not concrete, but very practical examples of like what to remember in the world. And that's like that would probably be in the top few principles for people to really take away and remember with as far as living this life, right?
Yeah,
it's really good.
And if for anybody who's listening, it's like no matter what that new version of yourself you're trying to be physically, nutritionally, emotionally, and absolutely spiritually, like, yeah, there's going to be times where it seems hard, right? It doesn't mean give up. It doesn't mean give up. It means just take that next step. Just take that little baby step. It's okay.
Yeah. It's great.
Yeah, the giving up ultimately is a giving up on the self when that happens, right?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Exactly, Sean. Exactly.
Tim, maybe you could share just your office and your name in case anybody is looking for a great chiropractor in the area or for do some light work with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the office name is Cornerstone Family Chiropractic. We are in the town of Bellingham, which is right on the border of Rhode Island, and happens to be my hometown. It's where I grew up. It's where I met my wife, and so the town has a special place in my heart. And I'm actually funny point, like where my office is physically located is right behind the Dairy Queen where I had pretty much my first job. So I didn't make it very far. Yeah, I just kind of like full circle came right back around.
I'm gonna work over there.
Yeah, exactly.
You always want to be close to ice cream. That's wisdom.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And I still have nightmares of that. I'm working back there and all of a sudden I can't make the awesome curl on the phone anymore.
Oh, no.
It's ridiculous. And I'm getting like in my dream, I'm getting angry that I can't make the curl that I used to be able to make. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
That's funny.
So it was, yeah. So guys, this is I appreciate you guys having me on.
Oh, it was such a great call. Thank you so much. And we'll have to get you back on because I know we could talk for probably like 4 hours.
I know.
I think I could grace you two with my presence again. I'd be willing to do that.
Perfect.
But not too soon.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, awesome, Tim. Have a good one. Thanks for sharing. And we look forward to connecting with you again inside the podcast and outside the podcast.
Oh, you got it, brothers. Cool.
Thank you all. And please like, subscribe, and share when you check this out. And let us know what you think about the podcast.
Definitely like, subscribe, and share, followers.